Okay. Let me get the rest of these. Um, Hi, Death. How are you? Give me just a moment. I'm still doing a little bit of setup and trying to get this royalty-free music stuff going so that I don't get taken down or whatever YouTube does. Okay. Hey, Tutor, how are you doing? Sorry, I've never streamed on YouTube before, so I'm kind of like getting some stuff uh set up, so give me just a second. Hey Kerr, how are you? Okay, this is not what I expected, but I have some royalty-free music in the background. Yay. Okay. Um yeah, I've never done a YouTube live thing before, so this is a little bit different from what I'm used to. Like it's the same, but it's also different. Okay. Oh, thank you. It's my Persona 4 shirt. Alright, let me get... There's at least one more person who will be getting a review tonight, and some others depending on if I hear back from them, but... Okay. Yeah, Persona 4. I am actually playing Persona 5 Royal, and I'm like, okay, hi Zeke. I'm like almost done with the Bank Palace, so like the third palace. Um, this is Zeke. He needs attention for a minute because otherwise he will um, start acting out. Hey, no, you can't have my necklace, bud. Tuck that away. So, alright, so, Death, we'll start with you since you're here. You've been after that pen for a long time, haven't you? Yeah. Yeah, you... This is what I deal with every day. Oh. Okay. you've had your attention. No, Zeke. Down you go. Alright, so tell me, um, a little bit about this and kind of like what you want to do with it. Like, what is your goal? Oh wow, there's a longer stream delay here than I expected. Oh, that's okay. But yeah, once oh my god. Okay. Yeah, Zeke really wants to attack my pen or like anything else he can get his paws on my desk. I've got other pens that he doesn't go after. It's always this. And then I have my desk control thing is a little lever right here, and it moves it up and down, and if he can't get the pen, he'll try and chew on that for some reason. I'm drawing it as a persona, as in like the game, like the Persona series for a D&D kind of game. Okay, cool. I can dig it. So are you looking for like a general review? Are you looking for like anatomy? Is there anything about it that you really like want feedback on specifically? If not, that's okay. I'm just trying to understand what you're looking for. Because sometimes people want specific critiques, sometimes they want like a more general overview, and I'll try to do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm you with too much info. So we'll try and look at some bigger pictures and stuff like that. Okay. An overall review would be nice. Any mistakes would be pointed out would be appreciated. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask pretty much everybody, is are you using a reference? And if you are not, I definitely recommend finding something that's kind of similar, because references always, they just make drawing better in general. Even people who can draw a convincing figure from just memory will use references for all the time. Alright, so looking at it, let me collect my thoughts for a second. I like what you did with the arms. You've got some good arm movement here. Really, this whole shoulder area. Hey Pizza, how are you doing? Let me see. I think there's a setting that will show where my cursor is, so let me, first streams are always like really rocky, right? There's always stuff to fix. I swear there's a thing that will show a yellow dot or something where my pen is. Give me a sec. If anybody uses OBS, let me know where I can find that, but I'm sure that has been a setting in the past if it's not anymore. let me just double check. Oh, here we go. Okay. That's where it is. Cancel. Yeah, Zeke is being a troublesome. Why is it not here? Here? Properties. Capture cursor. Oh, okay, it is showing. It's not what I expected, but it should be showing. Okay, cool. Sorry. Yeah, I will have all this ironed out for the next one. Okay, so the first thing I would recommend is learn to draw from reference. Because so drawing is a very visual skill. You have to know what you're seeing in order to be able to draw it. Come on, Camilla. So if you and you're not always going to be able to find the exact pose that you need. So the best thing to do is just kind of work with what you've got. That being said, for not using reference, this is pretty good. The proportions generally don't look bad. You're on the right track for sure. So using a reference will help you get much better. And if you, like I said, if you can't find a reference, just get close enough and you can work with that. So this is Camilla over here. This is my Bengal. She's a good girl. Alright, so if you don't have a reference, you can, if you're using Clip Studio Paint, you can use those 3D models. They do a pretty good job. And that will be a big help too. And you can model those however you feel is helpful. Another thing, I'm going to find a reference picture, just something out of my figure drawing library that is appropriate for YouTube. Give me a second. Another thing you can do to help with figure drawing is, here, we'll use this guy. Another thing you might want to do when you're doing figure drawing is draw over a photo. So like, you don't want to trace it, so you don't want to do something like this where you go around and trace everything, okay? Because that doesn't help you. That kind of teaches you the wrong thing. But drawing over it like this and just quickly getting the idea down, that can be a good way to learn. Now, obviously, if you do this, you don't want to trace it. Like I said, you don't want to trace it exactly, and you want to credit any sources that you do a draw over for like this. You don't really have to credit references. It's a nice thing to do, but it's not something necessary. But if you're going to actually straight up draw over something, then generally you do want to credit the source if there is one, okay? But anyway, back to your drawing. So yeah, and like Rick said, there's a lot of places that you can find pose packages. Senshi stock on DeviantArt is free and is a really good place to start. You can find tons and tons of reference on Pinterest. And then there's also some some places on Twitter and Gumroad that you can pay like $5 and you get a whole pack of reference poses. So whatever is within your means, you can find something to work with it. Okay, so like I said, you've got good arm movement here, and you've got a pretty decent grasp on proportion. There are some minor issues, but don't worry about that too much, because to some extent, you know, we're not always going to get it right, and even the best artists don't get it exactly right in every drawing. So it's okay if it's not perfectly proportioned every time. Something that I think, let's see, I'm going to do a little draw over here. Make my pen a little bigger. Yeah, isn't she wonderful? She's making her biscuits. Okay, so let's see. Let me just get more of an idea of what's going on here. Okay, so I think your legs are a little bit too short, which it looks to me less about not knowing proportions and more that you were running out of paper. Which, if you find yourself running out of paper, it's okay to just cut the figure off. That's often better to do than shortening your figure, because when you shorten the figure, you're kind of starting to train yourself to draw short, and you know, you want to develop healthy drawing habits. You don't want to have to force yourself into small ones or short ones because you're running out of paper or whatever. Anyway, so I would keep an eye out for that. Another thing I see here, I don't have a very good read on. Here's the rib cage and the chest cavity. I don't have a very good read on the hips on this one. What I am... so you have this line here, and it goes way up, but the curve of the hips seems to be right here, which means the bottom of the hip should be here, but with this line, it looks like the leg is going all the way up, almost to his belly button. So watch for that, because pant legs generally don't go, you know, all the way up. Even if they're really tight pants, you're still going to see the bottom of the hips there, because what happens is, here's the pelvis. The leg actually connects, so I'm going to draw this as if it was from a front room. Say this is the pelvis. The legs actually connect kind of on the sides of the pelvis. This is a very, very simplified drawing. So even if you turn it 3/4 like you have here, the leg is going to connect here like this, okay? So even if these pants are really, really tight, you're going to see the bottom of the pelvis. And you're going to see it connect into the other leg. Does that make sense? So you can think of it as kind of a cylinder, with the legs coming out of the sides of the cylinder. So no matter which way you turn it, you're going to see the underside here where the leg is not blocking it. Okay, so back to here, I don't think we would see this line going all the way up, just because it looks to me like the pelvis should be here, so what we would, oop, wrong eraser. What we would end up seeing is something a little bit more like this. Just need to install that feature in your sketchbook. Yeah, right. Let's see, what else? I think you did good here with the chest, and the stomach is doing well. Again, just see if you can find a reference or find something close to what you need, because seeing how the body parts connect together will help you a lot. I tried, but the program called me ugly and deleted itself. No! No! Alright, and zoom in one. So, this hand looks alright. Yeah, sometimes I have to like actually do the gesture to make sure it's on right. This hand looks alright. This hand is a little bit rough, and I'm going to be honest with you, this is a hand position that even I will have a lot of trouble with. And I'm still kind of figuring out for myself the best way to do hands, or how to explain how to do them, because they are very, very tricky. So hands, they kind of, this is where the front or the top of the hand is. So like if you were able to see through the fingers, this is kind of what you would see. Is it's a curved, the palm is curved slightly, and it's somewhat flexible depending on how your fingers move. So you could have a finger or a hand like this. You could have a hand like this, which makes them really tricky to draw in 3D space. So again, definitely take references with hands especially. I'm going to find a picture of a hand. That's perfect for this. Create new from clipboard. So with hands especially, you can find packs of hands for free, and it's just hands all over the place. There's a lot of free hand reference out there. Definitely take some time, like 5-10 minutes a day, just drawing, simplifying the hand shapes so that you can kind of get the hang of how it works, because hand mechanics are very, very tough to get the hang of, and there's a reason that a lot of artists try to avoid doing them. Okay, so definitely draw over, trace. You know, you can do it like I did, where you kind of just do the gesture. You can do it more precisely, where you're doing the skeletal construction, and then you draw over that. But you definitely want to spend time drawing real hands, because that will help you navigate some of the construction better and some of the trickiness of hand anatomy. And like I said, just like 5-10 minutes a day, you can do them as your warm-ups before you start doing whatever thing you want to really draw. But it's well worth the practice, in my opinion, to spend that time. And then you'll get to a point where you'll have some just kind of go-to hand poses, and that's okay. Most artists, especially in comics, will have kind of their mental stock of hand gestures that they can pull out of their heads as they need to. So yeah, make sure to check that out and find yourself some good hand references. You can do the same ones over and over. You can do all sorts of different ones. There's a lot of hand photos out there, and jewelry ads are a great way. You find them with the rings and the necklaces, and they do all sorts of interesting hand gestures, and you can get a lot from that sort of thing. Okay, let's see. Hi, Zeke. Zeke's gonna come back up here and say hi in a second. Okay, let me get this out of the way, because he will be more obnoxious if I don't. Alright, one more thing that I will talk about is, hey, the idea of contrapposto, which is sort of like off. Wow, you are. Stop it. You. Stop it. Stop it. But okay. So I'm sure many of you here have heard of contrapposto, which is the idea that the hips and the shoulders tilt in different ways. And you sort of have that here, but I think you can push it a little bit further. I don't know if you've heard of sometimes it's called the bean challenge, sometimes it's called the flour sack challenge, but it's the idea that the torso can be compared to a sack of flour. So to some, like, this might be a torso, but I could also draw the same thing as a sack of flour that's kind of tilted backwards. So doing those kinds of exercises may help you kind of understand the concept better, but basically, so you want to... I don't know if you've heard of the line of action. It's kind of like a line of movement that the figure follows, and you kind of want to build your contrapposto, your body shape around that. So with this character kind of has like this sort of a vibe, and it usually follows the spine. So follows the spine and goes into the hips and then out the front. So this is about roughly what you've got, and so you kind of want to do that, and then you can kind of do a zigzag connection to see how the torso will and the hips will come in, will happen, basically. The human figure is very much a rhythm, kind of like this, of sort of interlocking curves. So you can think of different parts of the body as different curves or different lines that kind of bump out the figure with the line of action goes. So like the shoulders, and then you have the hips, and it goes like this. Oops. So then these are the shoulders up on the top, and it'll go out where the zigzag pokes it out, and then in where the zigzag lets it in. And you can really, so then the legs, you have the legs down here. Zeke's being bad. So then you have the legs down here because this knee sticks out, and then you have the feet. Hey, Ace! Okay, That's another thing that you can do with a figure. Let me find a better figure that shows the Zeke, please! Bud, you are being way aggressive. Okay, here's one that we can reference. Maybe. Okay, maybe not, because it won't let me copy. Where is a good photo for this purpose? Zeke, seriously. So why won't it let me copy and paste any of these pictures? Okay, so I'm gonna... So you can do a draw over on this too, on photos too, for this purpose to learn, kind of get the hang of it. But you do the shoulders and the hip bones, and then you can see kind of goes like this. And the hip bones and the shoulders usually go in opposite directions, or opposite slants. To even if it's just a little bit, they usually go slightly off, because that's how the body maintains balance, is keeping the two sides in opposition from each other. So you can, and this will take some practice to really grasp the hang of, but once you get the hang of this idea, it makes a big difference. So just find some photos. You can go through Pinterest or whatever, just regular people. You don't have to use something like this, and you just find the shoulder line and the hip line, and then connect them. That makes a big difference in learning how to draw torsos. And one thing that I recommend to people that are learning how to draw figures is to start from the torso. Excuse me. The reason that I recommend that, and this was taught to me by one of my art teachers, is the torso is where all of the action is in the human body. Everything goes through the middle of the body. It goes through the torso. So you can start from the head, and a lot of people do. That's very normal for many artists, because we think about the head first. But the head by itself does not have a lot of action. And so by putting the head in a certain place, you're kind of having to build around something that doesn't really define what the body is doing. So I like to recommend, let me open a new, I like to recommend that people start from the torso, because then you can get, and then go to the legs, because then you can get a much more convincing and dynamic form of action. And do the head the last, because then you can really, like, the head is kind of the way to, that like final piece that directs the action, because usually you're gonna face wherever the head is facing is gonna be where it's kind of feels like it's all going in the end. But you really get all of your energy from the torso. So like if I was doing this from the head first, it would be a little bit harder to really sell the action. And I mean, you can do it. It's not like, this is, this is my way of doing it, and this is why I like to do it, and this is why I recommend it, is because I do feel like it gives a much more dynamic energy to the figure. But yeah, if you start from the head, you're kind of starting with an anchor that doesn't have a lot of movement on its own. So if you teach yourself to draw from the torso first, you will probably, well, in my opinion, and your mileage may vary because each artist has a different way of doing things, and mine is not the only way, but I feel like you get a lot more movement even for fairly static poses like somebody just standing there, because the human body is never perfectly still, you know? The human body is always moving even when we're sitting still. We're breathing, we're swallowing our saliva, we're, thinking, and that shifts our posture and our position. We're slowly slouching because our body gets tired without us realizing what's going on, and you shift your position without even realizing you're doing it. So you've got to always think of the human body as something in motion, and that's how you kind of get that motion out of it. And most of the movement comes from the chest and the hips, and they're dynamic. So I'll go back to yours here. So I would definitely spend some time, number one, kind of tracing some hand photos to get the feel of it, because those are very, very complicated, and the best way to learn how to draw hands really is just to draw them. And then number two, work on some of this this contrapposto and this kind of zigzag idea, or the flour sack idea. There's a lot of videos and tutorials on how to do flour sack or bean. Sometimes I see people call it a bean. So if you ever get stuck, you can ask me or look those up on YouTube, because there's more professional teachers than I am. Okay. Any other questions about this one? I don't want to overwhelm you. I think you're doing some good things. I like the designs that you've got here. Some of the details is really cool. I like this guitar design. Feels a little bit Kingdom Hearts. But overall very metal. So, Zeke, really? Can you not smother Camilla? Here, play with your tail. No, your tail. Go with my glove. I want you to know he's been sitting here purring. Every time I pick him up, he's been purring the whole time. You can't hear it, but it's very purring. Ow. That's a claw in my finger. Alright. Yeah, I mean, your anatomy is doing pretty good. It's always going to be a work in progress. Artists are always learning all the time. Even ones that are like good, so to speak, are still learning all the time. So you're on the right track, though. You're definitely doing good things. So just keep practicing with it, and be patient with yourself. And I'll be doing these streams every month. You're welcome to sign up for every single one. I don't foresee them getting too popular yet that I can't cover everybody's piece. So, yeah. And then you can always come back to this video. This will be live for as long as YouTube lets me keep it up. So you can always come back to this video and review anything that I've said if you need to. So, alright, since Ace is here, we're going to move on to theirs. So this is your Detroit Being Human fan comic. Tell me a little bit about sort of what you're looking for, what you're doing, what sort of things you want reviewed. If you have anything specific in mind. And meanwhile, I will make sure Zeke behaves. He's acting out because I have an audience. He always does this. Every stream day. Don't you? Don't you? Don't eat the microphone. You little fuzzy monster. Let go of my glove. Ow! You brat. If I put you down, will you leave Camilla and the ferrets alone? He really wants to get me. He really, really, really wants to get my hand or my pen or something. Hey. Yeah, Zeke is a little poop. What is this? What is going on? What is going on? Okay, okay, bud. Now you get to be put down. Alright, I don't have anything too specific, just the order should be going in. Any tips for making a comic? Okay, as far as this being a 4-panel comic goes, I think you are pretty much right on the money in terms of writing. Your beats are pretty much exactly where they need to be. I mean, like, I think this is a very thoughtful concept for a comic. If I were to change the order of things, I would consider making this panel 1, 2, have panel 3 with Gavin upside down, and then what the hell is his name? I forgot his name. I know his name. Why can't I remember it? Mr. Android. I would have like a panel 3 of Gavin upside down and Mr. Android being like, what the heck? You know, WTF, mate. And then have the software instability as panel 4. Nines, that's right. So that would be a different way I might do it, but I don't know that you have to. I think this reads very nicely as a comic the way you've done it. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. I think you've done a good job there. Something that is a little tougher to figure out in comic crafts sometimes is how the eye is going to flow through the pages. And it's something that I still kind of struggle with a lot, and I catch myself doing some issues. You know, I'll be sketching and then I'll go to ink and I'll be like, why did I set it up that way? but there's a couple ways you can help with that. So one is using, make a new layer here. One way you can help is by using characters' eyes, because readers will reflexively follow where a key character is looking. Okay. Now with a static panel layout like this, where you're using the 4-panel thing, the standard 4-panel format, and you're doing a fairly simple scene without a lot of camera work, that can be harder to do, and that's okay. You don't have to do fancy camera work or anything like that. Another way you can do it is with dialogue, with where the speech bubbles are. So I think if you moved this one, if you're going to keep this layout with the 1, 2, 3, 4, I would move dialogue boxes in the top row down a little bit. I wouldn't put, well, I would probably move this down to the middle somewhere, because then the reader will probably go boop and then turn around. Another thing you might be able to do is to flip the positions of the two characters in each panel. So I'm gonna just do that real quick. I'm gonna copy. Oops, wrong layer copied. Okay, so if I flip each panel, I'll just flip the top two for now. Oop, I'll flip the text back. That'll be distracting. Transform, flip. Okay. So this way you have the reader coming in and they're following Nine's. Why is my pen? Oh, it's the wrong pen. This is a mess, isn't it? You have the reader coming in and they follow Nine's gaze to Gavin, and then you can probably move. Oops, turn that off. Move this down, because then you'll have a speech bubble here that kind of pulls the reader down, and then they will, anyone who reads a left to right language, so English, will know to go to the next line. And then I guess if we flip these characters around, flip one more time, and then probably move this in here so that people are drawn, then the reader is actually drawn to look past the text, because if you keep it in the corner in this version, the eye is going to stop there probably. So the only panel I feel this does not work very well with is the last one, and I'm not sure if it is just me or if it's like, if there's really anything that can be done about it or anything like that. But the nailing the flow of the eye across the page is something that takes a ton of practice and thinking. It's something that is really hard to get down unless you're consciously thinking about it all the time. So, like I said, I think you did pretty good. In general, I don't know that flipping is necessarily needed. One thing that you can do to help with the flow is the first actor that talks should usually appear on the left, which is part of why I suggested flipping these, because Nines is the one that speaks first. Um, and that's per page or per scene. That's not like every single panel. It's just because we read left to right, you want the first person speaking to be on the left, because then you don't run into, like, if you have a conversation going, you're not going to have people crossing balloon tails. You're not going to have weird stuff going on. It's less confusing to the reader to have the first speaker as far to the left as possible for the scene. But yeah, I think this was a really good comic, a good setup, and you know, like I said, your beat pacing is right on point for what you are looking to do. So yeah, is there any other questions or anything that you have about it? Do you have any further digging that you'd like me to do? Yeah, and it's something that takes a while to get the hang of. And the first person speaking, you know, with every rule in art, you can break it if you need to. They're not always die hard, you know, always do this exactly this way things. It's you figure out what works for you and what works for your story that you're trying to tell. And sometimes it's okay um, to have the first actor speaking to be on not on the left or whatever. So you do have to kind of evaluate that as you need to, but as a general rule of thumb, if you have characters that are having a conversation or interacting in some other meaningful way, readability wise, it helps to have the first person speaking to be as far to the left as you can put them. Um, the line art is good, or should I go over it again? I think you're good. I think you are communicating the ideas across. I mean, I can tell Gavin is wearing a hoodie and pants. I can tell Nines is wearing his android jacket, the one that I remember from the game very well. Um, if you were to add anything anywhere, I would consider doing the seams on the pants. I think would add a lot. Just if you just put those lines in, and you can probably put the pocket line in. I think that's the one thing that if I was going to add any lines to this, I would do that. Because it would make it read very clearly that we've got these pants here. And you know, they read as pants without those lines, but that's one detail I feel like always helps with pants, is putting in the seam lines, because they're very prominent for pretty much any pant that anybody's wearing. You don't really see seams on shirts or hoodies unless they're really decorative or really prominent like they are here on Nine's Android jacket. But you wouldn't see seam lines as much on Gavin's hoodie. But on jeans and slacks and most pants, you're gonna see a lot. Feet and shoes are difficult indeed. That's another. I was talking earlier about tracing hand photos to get the hang of them. and I think that's something that you can do with shoes and feet as well, because they can be tough to get right. Um, you can Google or find references of so many feet pictures, and then you just you figure out kind of where the foot is, and then you can draw the construction of the shoe over top and kind of practice that whenever you feel like you need the foot or shoe practice. Because it is tough to get a shoe, it can be tough to get a shoe on a foot in drawing without making it look really blocky and awkward, or without making it look like it's vacuum sealed onto the foot. So doing tracing draw overs like that can be a good way to learn, especially if you don't have access to a regular art class. And something for those of you that want to learn figure drawing, if there's a university or something in your area that has any kind of art program at all, especially if there's a figure drawing class, you don't have to take the class, but a lot of times they will have a workshop every week or two that is basically a figure drawing session where you can go in, and sometimes you have to pay a little bit, but you get to sit there, you get to sketch models, live models for an hour or two. As long as you need, I think you can show up and leave whenever you want to. So if you have a university in your area or a community college or something, check and see if that's a thing. If you have a museum or an art center, sometimes they have them too, or they'll have some kind of similar thing. So you don't need like a full-on figure drawing class to get some of that good live practice in. Trick to shoes to make a really detailed speedboat and then stick the legs out the top. I mean, that is one way to do it. It's like shoes kind of look like a boat, or you can make this vroom vroom, so whoosh, awake and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of it is really just learning to break down the shapes, and that's easier said than done sometimes. But start learning human anatomy and clothing by tracing over many photos. Can confirm this method works for building up a visual library and muscle building. It really does. It really makes a big difference. And you can do it for things that like clothing. I'm gonna go back to this one. He's got that thing tied around. Oops. And you can learn how the fabric folds just by tracing the different folds and kind of following the lines. A lot of drawing is less about the specific structure and more about finding the energy in the drawing, the directions, because really if you can pull that off, you can draw a convincing drawing, much more convincing drawing than if you were just doing a very precise, constructed piece. So like, if you were going to draw this shirt, something that you would want to do is each of these creases is a line of energy. And all of the energy comes from somewhere and it goes from somewhere. So what you want to do is you don't want to just... I'm going to make this bigger, because zooming in is not a friend. Okay, so we're zoomed up real close on this. What you want to do is, instead of just strictly tracing the the folds like this. Like, you don't want to just trace each fold. What you want to do is you want to follow the fold all the way out. Oh, thank you. So, because the energy in the fold doesn't just stop there, it goes all the way, and it'll keep wrapping around this figure. Not that you can see it, but you can see here all of these lines. Each of these lines is a line of energy, and it comes out of where this knot is. And the same thing here is this fold doesn't just stop when it reaches the edge; it actually wraps around because the fabric is twisted. So what you want to do when you practice is practice following the entire line of energy, because what that does is it builds up your visual library. It also helps you understand if you're going to draw something like this, because you might have a scarf. This could be like a neck, and you might have a scarf that you're going to draw, and you can draw basically the same kind of look. This is basically a scarf. Oh, okay. So, if you're going to draw folds, you want to kind of follow the energy and see where it goes and where it comes from, and that'll help you understand how to draw a fold in other situations too. Typically, folds will come from, from points of tension and collect in points of tension, or in creases. So like if he was wearing this shirt, a lot of the cloth will be stretched here on the shoulder, at the edge of the shoulder, and then all of this will bunch in, a lot of it will bunch in down here. So you'll have, something that looks kind of like this. Okay. So yeah, when you are drawing pretty much any kind of clothing or shoes, tracing is a very good way to help. And you just literally grab any photo off of Pinterest or Google or whatever, trace it. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Spend like a couple minutes max, move on to the next one, or move on to whatever you're doing, because like I said, drawing is a lot of it is about capturing the energy more than the specific structure, and learning to do it within a couple minutes is what really helps you capture that energy, what really helps you understand. Because if you spend longer than like 5 minutes, you're going to start getting caught up in the physical form, and there is a time and a place for that, but learning to do that, sort of capturing the feel of it, will go a long way. For more information about that, look up stuff on gesture drawing, is what it's called in art classes. And if you take an art class, they make you do a lot of it. A lot of timed, sometimes as short as 30 seconds, sometimes you get a good 5 minutes or so. But because the intent is to capture the idea and then refine that idea into a more concrete form. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to move on because I got one more to do. I don't think the person is here yet, so I'm just going to go over it, and if anybody has any other questions about it, let me know, because I will be happy to address any of that while I'm covering this one. If something I say doesn't quite make sense, because if it doesn't make sense to you, it might not make sense to the person who submitted this one. Okay, I think this is another situation where doing some underdrawing and some gesture drawing will help. What I get from looking at this is the artist is very, wow, this is a very high resolution drawing. I gotta make my pen size much bigger. I get a sense that the artist is trying to focus a lot on shape and form, but not so much focusing on the structure or the dynamics of the figure. He did send me a reference picture. Let me see. I'm not gonna pull the reference picture up here, but I do want to look at it. Yeah, I get the feeling that this is a very surface level drawing, and I don't mean in like a technical sense. I mean more literal, like literally drawing what you're seeing. And I think that makes kind of the whole thing feel a little bit stiff and awkward. So if I was doing this one, show off my comic there by accident. I feel like there's a lot of ambition in this drawing, okay? And that's not a bad thing. Ambition is good. But I feel like there's a little bit too much ambition, because I feel like the artist wants to know more about how to draw and is trying to tackle too much, and in the end is just tackling the very outside level of the form. Cat fuzz on my and I'm trying to think how to explain it, but so you know, obviously as visual artists we draw what we see, but we also have to draw, especially with human anatomy, we have to draw what we can't see. And I think the artist here, I think, would do well to spend some time practicing drawing the underbody or the understructure of the figure. So, like, you know, the simple shapes and the bones, so to speak, or maybe literally. I mean, literally drawing a skeleton might help understand. Different people comprehend these things in different ways. But I think this artist could really do well to spend some time drawing very simplified forms. Practice putting the pieces together. I think the shading is good for what is happening here right now, but I think learning to do the shading is less important right now than learning to understand the forms, because once you understand the forms and once you know how to simplify them and craft them in your head, you can better understand how to render them. Because, you know, for example, the deltoid on the shoulder is kind of a spherical shape, and the bicep is a fairly cylindrical shape. And they're not exactly cylinders, but once you kind of wrap your brain around that idea, the light is coming from down here, so you can pretty confidently say, okay, well, here's where the shadow is for the deltoid, and here's where it is for the bicep. The forearm is kind of a plank shape, like a long rectangular box. Okay, well, here comes the light. The light's going to illuminate this side, and this side is going to be in shadow. So I think that learning to break the figure down into these simplistic shapes and understanding how the pieces fit together right now is kind of the next step that you're going to want to do from here. Because the drive is certainly there. This is a very ambitious drawing because it's trying to tackle everything at once. And really understanding these shapes that go into the human form and breaking it down and just doing kind of like stick figure-ish or skeleton studies or just, you know, you could literally just do something like this where you draw kind of a robot shape, you know. Practicing that will help understand what's going wrong, because one of the things that let me see, one of the things that the artist said is first attempt to pull it all together and draw a person with actual face and hands and fingers. Something's off, can't figure out what, something about the arm is not working, and I tried to fix it a number of ways but none quite worked. So when you understand how these shapes go together, that will help you identify what is you're perceiving as what you're perceiving is incorrect. And so also a disclaimer here is that just because you perceive something as wrong doesn't mean it is necessarily wrong. Perception, an artist's perception of their work and their ability varies. Sometimes we see things for what they are, sometimes we don't. And that's very true in our own work because we're very close to it all the time. Especially while we're working on it. You're not always going to see things the way they really are. So, you may find yourself in a position where something feels wrong and it's really not. And if you're not sure what's going on, it's usually best to take a break. Sometimes I find it helpful if something is really just giving me that much trouble, I just start over from scratch. Sometimes I don't, but yeah, when you're drawing something and you can't figure out what, the best thing to do in my experience is to look at the underlying structure and kind of see what's there, and if that works, if that looks right, because this seems okay to me, like it doesn't seem totally off, and if that underlying structure is right, it could be that you're just not used to seeing what you're seeing. It happens all the time, especially when you're trying something new. I run into it frequently when I'm doing some weird anatomy that I've never done, especially with like drastic foreshortening. Things just don't look right sometimes. Even if they really are. And so sometimes you look at the underlying structure, sometimes you just take a step back and leave it for a while. And like I said, if you're really not able to fix it in your head, sometimes just starting it over will make a big difference. So yeah, I don't think the arm is totally off. I think this right here, where the foreshortening from the elbow and the forearm, I think that's good. I think that's about right. I think where things kind of get muddled is right here. Part of that is because the drawing itself seems muddled. The shading is a bit off. This thumb is crooked. That is a tough thing to get right, though, so it's not like a... wow, it's not like a ding, you know? It's just... that's kind of, might be contributing to it. The wrist can be tough to connect sometimes to the hand. Look at the reference again, because that hand... No, that is more or less how his arm is. One other thing is if you're drawing from reference, it's okay to fudge it. You know, you don't have to draw exactly what you're seeing on the photo. If something, like if I was drawing this from reference, I would probably put this hand here so that you can see it. Because without that there, just turn this line off, the hand kind of disappears into the elbow and you don't know where it is, what it's doing, where it's going. And the photograph is actually showing that. That's what it looks like on the photo because it's wrapped around his rib cage. But sometimes you need to fudge the reference or the drawing so that the drawing makes sense. Let me think. What else? What else? Yeah, I think that's about everything. Oh, with photo reference, one thing that I was going to bring up earlier, and this is just a general thing, is, hold on, let me pull this guy back into full frame. So, there's a weird quirk about photography and drawing, okay? And it is that heads, if you... Hey Vervain, how are you? My pen had to get really big. If you draw, just like straight up draw over a figure in a photo, the head is going to be the wrong size, and I don't really quite understand why or how that is. It's some weird thing about how our eyes process the drawing versus the photography. And I've seen it brought up by some other artists before, and if you end up tracing, you will run into it fairly frequently. This is probably actually not a good picture to show that on. Let me find a better. Okay, so here. So if I just draw over this guy, and do this real quick, and then I trace his head. His head is going to be too small if I just do kind of a straight draw over. So, like, on a fully figured human... Oops. The head should be slightly bigger. The head should come down, the second head should come down from the bottom of the chin to about the bottom, or lower on the chest anyway. So what we've got here is, keep in mind if you're going to practice using photos that you need to make the head slightly bigger if you're doing draw overs, because otherwise it will be out of whack. And again, I don't really understand why that is or how to explain it. It's some weird way with how the mind understands photos versus drawings, but just keep that in mind if you're going to do... you don't really have to do it with photo reference because your brain will just kind of automatically adapt, but if you're doing actually drawing on top of a photograph like this, definitely keep that in the back of your mind as you practice, that you need to make the head slightly bigger. And as Rick says, flipping your canvas will make a big difference if you're trying to pay attention to anatomy and stuff. Not as easy to do in traditional media, but any kind of drawing you're doing, if you flip the canvas, a lot of things will jump out that you wouldn't have seen normally. So, alright, I think that about does it. Does anybody have any other questions for the last bit of the stream tonight? Anything that you want me to go over? Or get into just real quick? We got about 10 minutes. Alright, so long story or TLDR, use references, they're good. Don't be afraid to draw over. Just remember the head is going to be a little bit too small if you're drawing on top of a photograph. If you're using Clip Studio, use the hell out of the 3D models. They are such a blessing. How would you go about practicing other styles of coloring or drawing? So this is how I would do it, and as always in art, different artists might have a different approach. Your mileage may vary. I do it by just copying, not tracing. Although tracing can be fine as a practice tool if you are not sharing it and not passing it off as your own work. Honestly, anyone who says tracing is not good, they either mean it's not good to trace something and claim it as your own, or they don't understand what more experienced artists mean when they say to practice with tracing. So I would do, if copying, having, just like you're using a photo reference, I would do that. If you are, if that's not working, I think drawing over is a fine way to kind of get the hang. If somebody's style is something you really like and you want to learn kind of how they do it. I've done it with comic panels, like digital comic panels. I will kind of deconstruct what they're drawing, and actually, Rick, I'm going to steal one of your pieces, if that's okay. Let me go to your Twitter. Because the one that you posted today, I'm going to steal this for a second. So this is one of Rick's drawings, and I'll link his Twitter down below to give proper credit, etc. So what I would do is, if I want to learn how he draws head shapes, I would actually go in and try and deconstruct his head drawing here. So you can kind of see the shape of the skull. This is how he draws the nose, there's the mouth. Kind of just follow the forms and get the idea down of what he's doing with his art. And then like, okay, so maybe I really like the eye shape, and I have actually run into where I really like the way an artist draws certain characters' eyes. So you go in and you just kind of get in there and just, deconstruct. And this is kind of how you'd want to do it with a photograph too, is you want to deconstruct the form. You don't want to just trace it. You want to like actually figure out where the working parts go and what is, under there. Because if you just straight up, if I just do this, I'm not learning the right thing. So you really want to get under there and draw the anatomy, the underlying anatomy, because really all of that underlying anatomy is what helps you create the right figure. Now, it is important to draw from photos or real people if you're able to do that. Some people can get their friends to pose or whatever. But something, so for example, a lot of people, they want to draw anime manga style. That's fine. A lot of people will start out drawing anime and manga style, and you can get to the right place even if you start out that way. But the way you learn to draw people correctly is to draw people, not manga people. The you have to know the rules in order to break them, basically, and you'll see a lot of artists, experienced professional artists that are way better than I am. We'll talk about this sometimes. Is you have to know what you're doing in order to mess it up, and so you can see in a lot of like super stylized animation, that doesn't seem to have like quote good anatomy, for lack of a better term. They Most of the people doing that art can draw a regular proportional human figure, whenever they want to, but it's because they have that knowledge that they can make a convincing chibi or Adventure Time woo arm thing, so that makes a big difference, is if you actually know how the body works for real people, then you can draw a manga character or a superhero comic book character or Adventure Time character that looks convincing despite not really looking like anything in reality. So yeah, I would definitely, if you're wanting to look at how to draw somebody else's line work or sketches or whatever, copy their work, deconstruct it. That'll help you go a long way if you learn how to break it down into parts. For coloring is a bit trickier because it's harder to break down, especially in digital art where there's a lot of layer tricks and stuff like that that aren't really apparent in a finished piece. I may one day make one of these streams just how Micah colors, and do just a walkthrough of that. The only other thing I can think of is look and see if any artists whose coloring style you like, see if they've done a tutorial. Look up color theory on YouTube. Is something that can be tough to wrap your brain around. Some art classes have or art schools have an entire class dedicated to color theory. It gets kind of complex sometimes, and it's something you have to practice, but it's also an extremely intuitive thing, just knowing what colors go where and how to make it all come together. So but if you can kind of wrap your brain around it, it'll go a long way toward helping you color especially with regard to picking colors. Um, one thing that I see a lot, a complaint, a common complaint in comics is uh, darker skinned characters getting whitewashed, and then you'll see the artist will be like sometimes. That's not just in comics; it's in a lot of digital art circles, and you'll see the artist being like, "Well, they are, black. There's just a light on them," and it's like, well, no. If you did it right, you would still be able to tell they're black, despite the strong directional lighting. So you're just being bad at your job. um, because even you you should be able to tell those kinds of things basically if you're doing it right. And knowing how color theory works can help with that. Um, so yeah, I would look into that. I would go over some color theory stuff, but like I said, it can get really involved, and it can be, it's not something I could do in just like 5 minutes. It would be like a whole stream if I was going to do something like that. Um, but yeah, if for like actual digital technique, I would look at see if any artists that you like have a coloring tutorial and kind of see what they use. Did you know black people turn into white people when illuminated by a light source, right? Um, so yeah, there's no good excuse for skin tones being washed out to the point that they don't seem to be darker skinned. And then, once you get used to, like Vervain Vanity is saying, once you get used to it, it just kind of clicks. Um, and color theory is very intuitive. You just kind of, there is a science to it, that's why it's called theory, but at the same time, putting it into practice is just something that you kind of have to intuit after a while. Um, so yeah, I hope that helps. Any other last minute questions before I close the stream down for the night? There's a hell of a stream delay for some reason. I kind of expected YouTube to have much less lag between me and the chat, but um, yeah, it's like a whole 30 seconds or something from the time I talk to the time the chat responses appear. Alright, well, I am going to close the stream for the night. Thank you all for coming tonight. Had a good time. I hope you found this helpful. Um, Rick, you're fine. You're doing fine. Stop it. Um, did I set it to low? No, it's on normal latency. So I don't know what's going on. I'll mess with some settings. My bitrate may be way out of whack or something. I'll see, hopefully the next one. I'll be doing this again in about a month, so the first or second week of March. Keep an eye out for signups and things like that. Hopefully I can find out a way to make the stream less laggy on or less of a delay. And yeah. Alright, yeah, take care. This will be up for rewatch whenever you guys want to see it. So pop back by the link, and yeah, I will talk to you all later. Thank you again. This was a good time, and hope to see you at the next one. So have a good night, everybody, and take care. Oh, I'm a YouTuber now, so I'm supposed to say don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment and all that stuff, so... Alright, good night everybody.